All right, I want to say hi to everybody out there today. I'm here sitting down with Shawn Spencer, who's the CEO of Cogent Advisors. It's a health benefit strategic advisory firm that I am working with. My name is Matt Gurwin. I'm the head of business development for a national accounting firm, and my job is to drive value for the people that I work with and the companies that I work with. And I had the pleasure of knowing Shawn for a long time, and also the pleasure of seeing some of the amazing things that Cogent Advisors is doing right now. So, Shawn, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So, I am going to ask you three questions today. It's going to be three topics. One is the Cogent Advisors Purchasing Coalition, which is very unique, that I have never seen before, that I want you to expand upon. The second one is going to be the HMOs versus the PPOs, and companies have gone to HMOs over the last couple of years to save money, can actually now go back to a PPO and still save money and really impact their employees in a much more positive way than they have in the last couple of years. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is the self-insured deductibles, spec and ag and all these terms, and say how is Cogent Advisors different than the typical self-insured program. So with that, the first question I have for you is the power and the financial impact of the Cogent Advisors Purchasing Coalition versus the typical self-insured program that you have mentioned that they're kind of on an island. So can you expand upon what you mean by that and how Cogent is different from the typical self-insured program?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of key components there, Matt. And first of all, that when most people look to go self-insured, it's very concerning because you're like, well, I want to self-insure because I don't want to give the insurance company all my money, but I'm concerned because I'm bearing 100% of that risk. And so it can be intimidating to a lot of organizations, especially organizations that are in that medium-sized market, which is what we're targeting, because those are the ones that, as we look at it and that we've seen, are really being led astray by the fully insured marketplace from the insurance companies, because there's a significant amount of savings that and that they can actually have control and still manage to protect that risk. And so how they do that is through our purchasing coalition, and that purchasing coalition gives them the ability to have the buying power over Fortune 500 companies. So when you have that Fortune 500 buying power, there's a lot that comes with that. So it reduces your risk, but it also gives you the ability to reduce that cost. And so we do that because the reinsurance is the carrier that covers the bulk of losses or any major exposures that are there. And I know we're going to talk about specific deductibles in a few minutes, but really when you get into that reinsurance piece, the reinsurers is what's going to help protect that. Well, when you can pool through like our purchasing coalition, multiple companies, right? There's over 150 companies right now part of our purchasing coalition, which is encompass over 35,000 lines. That really puts you in the same buying power as a Fortune 500. And so when you do that, now we can bring to people something they couldn't get before to still manage that risk, right? But also benefit from some significant cost savings, because as you know, in the accounting world, I mean, the employee benefits is your second to third largest expense for most businesses, and it's incredibly taxing, if you will, of how do they manage around that and still create margin for themselves. So that's kind of how we do that, is we give people the buying power versus if you're on this island by yourself and you're this own company and you're like middle market, 400 to 500 employees or 100,000 employees, and you then go to buy this, now you're bearing all that risk. And so you don't have any other organization with you. You're on that island by yourself. So yeah, there's a good chance that you could profit, but there's a really good chance that you're going to have to run into some expenses that may be more than what you were budgeting for, which increases your risk. A lot of companies, for instance, every 5 to 7 years, you're going to see someone's going to have a really bad year. And so if you're on that island and you pick that year, that can have some significant negative impact on that organization. So our purchasing coalition helps solve that and puts people at ease.
Right, and just to clarify, so you're saying that if someone's already in a self-insured, whether it's Blue Cross or some other national brand like that, they're not giving you the benefit of, the buying power of all the companies they deal with. They're actually looking at you individually. That's why they're able to save them more money.
Correct, exactly. So when you think maybe I'm going to go to a Blue Cross Blue Shield purchasing, you're bearing that risk on your own, right? You're still on that island, right? Or whatever it is that you might be doing. You're not in a group you don't have a group purchasing, you're on that by yourself, you're rated specifically, but you're also bearing that risk. And we help reduce that risk through our purchasing coalition that give people kind of the best of both worlds to those that qualify for our program.
Great. Okay. So that's awesome. So I want to talk about the second one was, I know that there's many companies over the last couple of years had to go to an HMO in full or in part to save money. Now, I know there's a couple of cases that we're working on right now that I actually know the CEOs of a couple of these businesses. And one, I want you to just give a little bit of background. How are you able to, because on this one, you're able to actually help them go back to a national PPO and have a much more flexible program than the full restrictions of a HMO and still save money. So can you expand upon that example of companies that have gone to that have this opportunity now to go back and do better for their employees?
Absolutely. And when you talk about that, companies are looking, how do we, as we move as a country, into this recession, it's where do you free up additional dollars, right? So one of the ways you look at doing that, and again, your second largest expense is that healthcare expense, right? So you have payroll and expense. You don't want to cut a lot of your people's pay unless you have to. So you try to take it out of that next largest expense, which is in the healthcare space. So unfortunately, a lot of organizations that aren't aware of our purchasing coalition, they're looking at things like an alternative could be an HMO. And so that HMO, mainly the Blue Care Network, is one of the most restrictive HMOs that's out there, and not a lot of people have it. But the problem is that that's kind of a necessary evil for a lot of companies, and it's less expensive, but because there's a lot of restrictions that go with it. And so it really doesn't help when you have to share with your employees, especially if you move from a PPO to a HMO, and explain that people now have greater restrictions on where they can go to a physician and how they go about handling the healthcare for their employees really doesn't positively impact the culture of their organization. What we do is we give them that ability to leave that HMO, move into a national PPO. And so that regardless of where they're at in the United States, they have that opportunity, that broad brush of many doctors to choose from for their families and to make sure that they get the very best care possible, because we also do this, mind you, without disrupting any of the plan design that they have in place or the plan design components that they really like. And we want to make sure that we keep track of that and we make sure we keep that in place and keep that intact. So that's one of the unique things that we do. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, the result is we're able to do that and give people a significant cost savings. Again, for those that qualify into our program, well, that's a game changer. And as we talk about, our purpose is improving the enterprise value of businesses. Again, the enterprise value is made up of the culture of organizations as well as the financial aspects. We're able to achieve both.
Right.
And that's what really makes us excited about helping companies, and that's, again, our purpose and why we do what we do.
Right, that's very exciting, especially because I've been talking to this with a lot of companies. They're concerned about employees. It's the war on talent. It's, keeping people, showing that the company cares about the employees. So this would be a very positive move, taking a company that went to an HMO and they came back to a PPO and able to invest in that benefit program to make their employees happy. So that's a very exciting thing that I hope anybody who's gone to an HMO for any reason over the last few years talks to you.
Well, we'd love to talk to them because it's really unfortunate, and we understand that people aren't moving to something that's more restrictive to negatively impact their employees. But you have to preserve your organization, and so it's one of the ways they're doing it. Unfortunately, when you, as the leader of that organization, have to talk to your employees and tell them, unfortunately, we're going to have at open enrollment, we're going to move you from this PPO program you've been used to, and then have to move you to this HMO program where it's going to be a little bit more restrictive, that's not a happy or fun conversation. Oh, and by the way, we're probably going to have to increase the employee contribution of that. And so when you do that, it just really, it negatively impacts the culture. And with the war on talent that's out there, it's really important that we focus on that and we work and partner with the HR directors to make sure that we're understanding of what are some of the wish list items that they would want to take care of and what are some of the objectives and issues that they've had and how can we help solve some of those. And we're able to do that with our purchasing coalition plan. It's pretty exciting and I'm excited to roll it out.
That's great. Yeah, I'm seeing it in real time, so it's very exciting. All right, so the third thing I want to talk about, the differences of the Cogent coalition and the purchasing program on deductibles. How is your self-insured program different than probably other self-insured programs, or at least things that you talk about when it comes to deductibles, spec, and ag that you mentioned? Why don't you clarify those in layman's terms, but then give people a sense to how you're approaching it differently than what they may be used to?
Yeah, those are great questions, and it can be rather confusing, right? So people need to be able to focus on their business and not worry about all these different deductibles and all this different insurance jargon, because it really doesn't. The ripple effect of that impacts their business, but to understand it can be rather confusing. And so we want to break it down very simply for people so they understand clearly what is their risk. And I think there's a huge lack of transparency for that. I'll give you a perfect example. One organization, they have almost 1,000, close to 1,000 employees, and they were in a self-insured program. And in this self-insured program, I asked the CFO, I said, hey, explain to us how you set the specific deductible, if you will, on that, which means at any amount above a certain dollar amount, the reinsurance company is going to pick up that cost. And so why that's an important thing is because you don't want to just guess willy-nilly or pick a number that just feels right. You want to use historical claims and analytics to make sure you're first establishing that right specific deductible for your organization based on risk, based on finance, and based on your current census population. So once we establish what that is, let's say it's $200,000, then we also look at what is the aggregate deductible that companies have to worry about, because okay, so for every case above $200,000, the insurance company is going to pick up that. Where some of the organizations, there isn't an aggregate deductible, so they can be held responsible for multiple $200,000 claims, right, with no cap. Whereas our purchasing coalition, there's an aggregate there. We protect them, where there's an aggregate of $500,000. So our purchasing coalition, you're going to have, if your spec deductible is $200,000, the max you're going to pay is $500,000. Now, that's unfortunate regardless, because those are, heart transplants or, issues with troubled pregnancies or whatnot, right? Those are very expensive and unfortunate, but they can also cripple a company, especially when they're not aware of it. And this instance, this one organization did not know that they were responsible for everything over and above.
So they had no aggregate limit where you're saying that if they were working with Cogent, they would have had a $500,000 limit no matter what. So if you have 1 year that's just a bad year, you have 3 people who get very sick, you're capped at $500,000.
Capped at $500,000.
So, which is your all-in.
Correct. And a lot of these, we clearly explain to people what their claims liability is, right, based on claims history, based on their statistics of their organization, as well as how we're going to proactively manage that. So here's how we set what that specific deductible is. Here's how it can impact that organization. But then here's what that max risk could be. And we really want people to understand that. And so that in addition to just how do we calculate that savings and how does that all come to fruition, we want to make that crystal clear to people so they can take advantage of it and have the peace of mind.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much. That was great. I'm glad you answered all 3 questions, and I look forward to seeing more opportunities to help companies along the way here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate it. Thank you.